Now, in order for me to help you uncover your fear and help you to become more inspiring and confident as a speaker, I first need to understand what exactly are you fearful of. What I would like you to do is to write down exactly what it is that you're fearful of. Don't overly think it. Just write it down from one end to the other. If you would like, you can pause this video for a moment as you write this down. I'll wait for you to complete this task and then I'll help you to analyze it. Pause this video now and write down exactly what it is that you are fearful of. Go ahead, do that now. Welcome back. Now I'm going to help you to analyze your list. What I'd like you to do is to go through your list and figure out how many of these fears relate to yourself and how many of these fears relate to your audience. Let me give you some examples. Some examples of fears that relate to yourself are things like, maybe you are fearful that you're going to forget your speech. Maybe you are fearful that you can't answer the questions, or your PowerPoint freezes, or there's a senior manager in the room and you're afraid of what they may say or how you're going to appear to them. Maybe you're going to be fearful of your technology failing on you. You are fearful of tripping on the stage, running out of time, being too loud, too soft, embarrassing yourself in some way. People looking at you. Maybe you're fearful that at some point you're going to start stammering. Maybe you're fearful that your nerves is going to be taking over you, or you're not going to be as good as someone else on your team. These are all fears that pervade around yourself. Now let's look at fears that relate to the audience. Fears about the audience is things like fearful that you are structuring your content in a way that maybe your audience might not understand. You're fearful that you are detailing some references that are not credible. Maybe you're fearful that your time will be too short to have an impact with this audience. Perhaps you're fearful that a power outage or some sort of failure in the conference is going to impact on the audience experience of your presentation. Or maybe you're fearful that the handouts that you have prepared might not be distributed to the delegates in time for the pre-work to be completed. Can you see the difference between these fears? On the self fears, I call these selfish fears because the fears have all to do with yourself. Remember what I said in an earlier lecture in this course. It is a privilege to speak, and someone has given you this opportunity to speak. So you don't want to be the person that only thinks of yourself. I would like you to be able to transcend your fear and take this opportunity, this privilege to deliver a message to the audience. And the only way that you can do that is to be selfless. When I talk about fears and overcoming fears, I say there are two reasons why a person might be fearful of presenting. Number one, they have not practiced, prepared, or rehearsed. So let's bank that and assume that you have practiced, prepared, and rehearsed. The only other reason why a person is fearful of speaking is because they are selfish. Now, for a moment again, I'd like you to review your list and see how many of your fears are actually selfish fears versus selfless fears, where you're fearing for something going wrong that's going to impact on the audience experience. Go ahead now and do that analysis, and I'll take you to the next step. I hope you're realizing now that most likely your fears are very self-based, they're selfish. And what I'm asking you to do is to stop thinking about your own needs, your own fears of what can go wrong, and start seeing yourself as a conduit of change. Your audience has taken time to listen to you, and you can't deliver to them a complete message if you're only thinking about yourself. You need to think of yourself as delivering a message. You are a conduit of a message, and that message has to come out of you to them. And the only way it can do that is if you think of your audience first. So that's lesson one, not to be selfish speaker, but to be a selfless speaker. Number two it's important for me to highlight that as we are born with two innate fears. One, we are fearful of falling, and we are fearful of loud noises. That's it. Babies have two fears. Every other fear that you have has been generated or built over time. But that's a good thing and a bad thing. Bad thing is, if you don't take the step, you can stay with those fears for life. Good thing is, because you are only born with two fears, you can also undo some of those fears and become confident in certain areas that you choose to, like speaking. So how do you do this? I'd like to introduce the concept of an upside down you. When you speak to an audience, you need to see yourself at the top of this upside down you. So what are the two factors that can bring you down as a speaker? On the one side is being overly confident. And it sounds a bit weird, but yes, it's good to have confidence, but not too much that you're coming across as being arrogant. And you know you're being a little bit too confident when someone comes past you just before your presentation and they ask you, "Hey, are you ready for your presentation?" And then you say something like, "Oh, sure, of course. I am ready. I was born ready." And you hear people say this, and that's what I mean by being a little bit too confident. And what I usually find is that people who are a little bit too confident attract a humbling fall from grace. Sometime in their presentation, something will go wrong. You know, the PowerPoint will freeze, or they'll forget something. A question from the audience puts them off track. Something happens that causes them to humble themselves. So being overly confident is not a good thing as a speaker. On the other side of the upside down you is a factor known as anxiety. When you are overly anxious, you cannot focus on your presentation. You're thinking of everything that can go wrong. And so that also causes you to think only of yourself and not about your audience. So what you need as a speaker is a balance of confidence and anxiousness, because that balance combined helps you stay up on the upside down you. I can confirm that regardless of how confident you are as a speaker or how many engagements you have as a speaker, you will always have a little bit of anxiousness before every presentation. I know this for myself as well. Because every time you deliver a talk, the audience is different. The complexity or the size of the audience is different. The mix is different. The background is different. The level of engagement is different. So when I speak to an audience, I know that there's going to be some change in the audience that's going to challenge me in a way that's going to grow me. And I also know that I'm confident enough that I know my content so that I am ready for this audience. So the combination of confidence and anxiety helps me stay up on the upside down you effect. That's lesson number 2 in helping you to become a little bit more selfless as a speaker. Let's look at number 3. As a speaker, your third lesson is to be aware of the assumptions and the beliefs that you have about yourself as a speaker that might be that inner voice that's dragging you down right now. So I've got a 3-step approach to helping you with this. The first is to really do some deep thinking and ask yourself, what assumption or belief about yourself do you have when it comes to speaking in front of a group of people? And write down everything, as ridiculous as it might sound. And then, for each one of those assumptions and beliefs, I want you to write down why each one is absolute nonsense. You heard me. It's nonsense. So maybe you have a belief that, only when you are with a team of people will you have the confidence to present. You need to ask yourself, why is that belief nonsense? And come up with at least 20 reasons why it's nonsense. So think of the times that you presented on your own and you were able to. Think of all those moments when you had the confidence, whether it was in your schooling days, whether it was at university, it doesn't matter. Come up with as many reasons why it's nonsense. And then your third step. For each of that assumption or belief, I would like you to come up with an affirmation or an alternative belief about yourself that's positive. And so I want you to restate that in a way that you can say this to yourself that helps you be confident. And that might sound like, I am able to speak in public. I will take up every opportunity to speak because it grows me. And when you say that to yourself, it's so much more empowering, and it opens up your mind to at least walking through the opportunity. So what I would like you to do as an activity, before you move on to the next lecture, is to review your assumptions and beliefs about your speaking. And I would like you to take the time before you move on to the next lecture to restate each one of that into an affirmation or a positive belief. Go ahead, do that now, and I'll see you on the next lecture.